Um, so last night I went to the second night of Heavy Midnight's Ladies of the 80s, A Decade of Horror at the Cinefamily. They showed 4 films that were produced or executive produced or made under the guidance of Roger Corman. Uh, released by his New World Pictures and or his other, I think one of them was called Concord Pictures, something like that. Obviously, all written and directed by women, or at least directed by women. So the first one they showed was called Humanoids of the Deep. I believe it's from 1980. And it was directed by Barbara Peeters. She made this film that's about these underwater humanoid creatures that are coming out of the water and attacking people. And she gave it to Corman and said, "Here's my picture." And he said, "Hey, I love the way you're killing the women or the men. You're going at it with glee. It's great, but you didn't really do enough with the naked ladies and the rape." And so he had the second unit go in and add more naked ladies and rape. At which point she tried to sue to get her name off the picture. That did not happen. And if you watch it, you can very much tell the parts that are under her direction and the parts that were added. And it's kind of depressing because it's a pretty decent B picture that she made. And then you see these gratuitous moments and you're like, man, it didn't even need this. But it had a lot to say about ecology and the rights of Native people, which, it's like it's a B film. It doesn't really need this like political undertones to it, but it's kind of fun when they do, It also featured a score by James Horner, the James Horner. Had some trumpets, obviously. And one of the production assistants was Galen Hurd, who would later produce the Terminator films and The Walking Dead. So that was interesting. This was followed by Slumber Party Massacre, which I have been told I needed to see for a very long time. It's a brilliant comedy horror, produced and directed by Amy Holden Jones. The original screenplay was written by Rita Mae Brown, but Amy Holden Jones was actually at this screening, and she told us that essentially the bulk of Rita's actual screenplay was rewritten by her. That the main theme about the driller killer and how that is a representation of the male body and penis and being afraid of sex for the first time in a very violent heteronormative way, is that theme she kept, and so she wanted to make sure Rita's name stayed on the film. But a lot of it was rewritten, and she added most of the comedy. Amy did. And it's a great film. It's yes, it is a slasher film, and yes, a lot of women die, a lot of dudes die, a lot of people die in this film. Actually, it's almost even in its gender representation of death, because if you count, spoiler alert, if you count the killer as someone who dies, I think it's 4 men and 4 women who die, and 3 women who live. So, I guess it's 5 women. 4 men who die, 5 women who die, and 3 women who live. So it's actually, but there's some great frank talk about various things that teenage girls talk about, and definitely some great shots where the drill of the killer is definitely framed to look like a penis, which is always good. And there's some great comic moments that I don't really want to spoil. But I definitely think this is one of the best horror films I've ever seen. Even though it's comedic, I don't see anything wrong with having a comedy horror. Sorry, I have allergies. I have allergies every morning. I think this is a great film, and you should definitely find this film. Definitely, somehow it almost made it to the 103 essential films by women, but it just barely missed making it into the list, and I'm kind of sad because I think it is definitely an essential film with a very feminine touch, and you can tell she was working for Corman, and she had to do some of the things he wanted, like have naked bodies, and you can tell the way she films it that she really wasn't having it, she really didn't want to do this, but she added it just so that Corman would be happy. She also said at the screening that even though this film was a success, and obviously Corman made a lot of money off of it because he gets all the money once it goes out there, she barely made anything. She didn't get a agent or a manager or any offers after making this really great little slasher picture. Unlike, all the dudes that go off and, like, all the dudes that worked for Corman went off and made, names for themselves, and all the women who worked for Corman very rarely did. Some of them managed, like, I'll get to one in a second, but, it was just really tough. She clearly was very bitter about the hiring practices of Hollywood. She also made it was like an art picture for Corman, and that one did well in film festivals, and then she still didn't really get hired for much after that. That doesn't really surprise me. Way to go, Hollywood. The next film was Sorority House Massacre. This was written and directed by Carol Frank, who was an assistant on Slumber Party Massacre, and there's this great moment in Slumber Party Massacre. There's a moment where someone's trying to get help, but as they're knocking on the door, the woman in the house turns on a slasher film so loud that she can't hear the guy knocking. And in Sorority House Massacre, the same thing happens, but the film that gets turned on is the moment in Slumber Party Massacre when the film gets turned on. So it's like a loop, and it's very meta and very hilarious. Sorority House Massacre has some really great late 80s fashions with, like, really tall shoulder pads and belts and just crazy, crazy stuff that I wanted to wear. All of it. I just loved it. This one was sort of about a woman who, as a child, went through a really terrible trauma, and she is connected psychically with the perpetrator, and somehow they both wind up back at this house where the trauma took place. And it's about sort of familial connections that can't be explained by science. But also, it's a good old-fashioned slasher with people getting killed. I enjoyed this one as well. I think she found a way to throw in the gratuitous nudity that was almost natural, because there's a moment when all the girls are trying on one of their sorority sisters' dresses, and then suddenly, woo, there's boobs. And while it does feel a little exploitative, it's like, at least naturally, when you're changing clothes, you might be that naked. You're probably wearing a bra, but, like, it almost works. It almost feels natural. But that montage was really cool because there was, like, so many dresses. And the last film was Strip to Kill, which was written and directed by Katt Shea, with her then husband Andy Rubin. And this one, the director was not there, but she recorded an intro, and she talked about how happy she was to get to know that this film was being played 30 years later, and audiences are still reacting to it. And she started out as an actress / model, and she was in a few of Corman's films, and then she started writing, and then she managed to get this film made, and she directed a few more, and then she directed Poison Ivy for New Line. And Poison Ivy is a great film with Drew Barrymore. Oh, wow, I'm getting really sneezy. So this one is about a serial killer who's killing strippers. And so a woman detective has to go undercover naturally at a topless bar. They only go topless for 30 seconds at the end of their act. So while there are lots of boobs, it is 100% natural because they're strippers, and a lot of the women in this film really were strippers, but they're not like penny ante strippers. They're like athletic, doing crazy, Vegas act type strippers. So, and they were filmed really well. It was really interesting to see these great acts and to see them filmed so not quite lovingly, but, like, with respect. And the editor did a great job of editing it together. I enjoyed this film a lot. I could have done without the last, like, 10 minutes, but that happens a lot with movies, I guess. It got a little kind of transphobic-y at the end there. But up to that point, it was, like, a really great film about murder and strippers. So I enjoyed all of these films. This was the second night in this 3-night celebration of women horror film directors from the 80s. There's 2 more films tonight, Blood Diner and Spookies. I've been meaning to see Blood Diner forever, so I'm really excited. Probably record that video tomorrow. So until then, keep watching the movies.